and Danfao for giving us the opportunity to organizing these meetings. And every year we have Optic Club, which is a great meeting point, and this is extremely valuable within the framework of exhibitions. Today we are going to try and tackle a topic which is extremely key for our future. Our current time doesn't seem to be characterized by major changes. However, huge transformations are underway that will have a huge impact on our sector and on the distribution channel. The distribution channel that used to be an independent part of the whole production line is becoming an integral part of something bigger. So there is a concrete ownership transfer for the distribution channel. Well, charts contain a lot of text, so you can read them as I will do as well. So novelty are gaining ground and old things are going back. Our current crisis is the longest crisis after the post-war period, and this crisis occurs in a period where events and economic cycles are changing our world abruptly. And a world which is changing radically cannot but have an impact on the eyewear market as well. The eyewear market is made up of different players, especially as far as the distribution sector is involved. Today we're going to talk about 5 different points. The globalization of economy, and that's actually the starting point of everything, the revolution of communication systems through the ICT. Well, ICT, information and communication technologies, accelerate the changes brought about by globalization, the implosion of segmentation within the supply chains. Supply chains become part of corporate subsystems, macroeconomic scenarios and market contexts undergo concentration processes to cope with international challenges. And last but not least, the great merger, that is the result of the merger between the two major players worldwide, Luxottica and Essilor. And this great merger is the consequence and the accelerator of this whole process. The globalization is comprises all the worldwide connections between economy, culture and politics, favored by the liberalization of trade areas and by technological progress, thus allowing people to move, and this led to standardized consumption and production models. So if you have a good memory and if you are older than the audience, so if you are as old as I am, when you went abroad and when you changed continent, you see that people consume, wear more or less the same things. So we have standardized behavioral patterns. In the past, instead, there were significant differences among the peoples, and nowadays, instead, we see very many similarities, and this is a result of globalization. What we project outside of ourselves is replicated by other people. There are attitudes and behaviors that have become globalized. Some industrial products have become globalized, and well, the number of consumers in emerging countries have increased, so many people could overcome poverty, and this is an effect of globalization that has reduced the competitiveness of the Western world. The Western world used to be the driver of development. We've lost at least partly this leadership, and this has reduced the economic power of the Western world. And big Western countries, in order to retain their leadership, have to implement a series of measures because there are no longer entry barriers, and many products can enter those markets.
Markets are polarized, and so we have this phenomenon for many consumers, no more barriers nowadays, and this means a high number of consumers. But these consumers are not poor anymore, but they're still low-income consumers, and we have also a lower number of rich people. So we have the luxury pole and the lower end of the market. We have no more the bracket in between. And what are the implications for the industry? Well, a lower value added, so niches or value of the brand, higher convenience, so low cost, that is winning in all industries and segments. Also, those in the luxury brackets have low cost consumptions and the penetration in new markets. So now the industry is getting ready to serve these new types of consumers, and this means that companies, in order to remain competitive, have to take decisions that they wouldn't have taken some years ago. Like in our industry, we now have Filtman in Italy, and Filtman is the leader in German-speaking countries. Actually, they wouldn't have moved, but they entered the Italian market because of globalization. They have to, they have opened up 4 stores, and as I said, Filtman is leader in the German-speaking countries with a turnover of 1.5 billion euros, and they sell 7.8 million glasses, and they leverage on convenience marketing. This means that they are now competing with those front chains that we have in Italy now. Now, frankly speaking, there's also another transformation element, and some of you know about it already. We have some sort of generalist distributors that will open up specialized optical chains with stores, maybe in the malls. I'm not going to name. This is the impact of Filmon. They do a lot of marketing activities, focusing on price, very aggressive on pricing, like 9.99. So this is the last Vicenza store that was opened, and this is the effect, the impact in the opening day. So in order to increase efficiency and recover in terms of efficiency and to defend your leadership, you have to increase volumes, improve productivity, integrate functions, covering more markets, and being innovative. And all this can be achieved, of course, if you increase also your size, the size of your company. These announcements, and they repeat it in different languages, so we have to wait. So I was saying another element is the revolution of communication systems and the ITC that is making this possible. So the big organizations that become multi-activity and that are present in many different countries and markets. So in order to keep the system under control, they need the IT help that allows all this. So EDI, ERP, cloud, device networks allow for the management of such a complexity. E-commerce, so offering directly products to final consumers, and B2B logics, well, these lead to online transactions at all levels without stores and without physical structures and facilities. What used to be actually the only key element in the past.
Well, all these words and keywords are part of this transformation, disruption. So the disruption of systems, we have to define new rules of the game. The values of the past no longer apply if you want to be successful. Big data, so the idea of having analytical systems in order to be able to extract information and to perform a market analysis when you have a huge amount of data. If you're a global players, you have access to an unthinkable amount of information. You have to be multi or omni-channel. That is, you have to integrate the same system into many different transactions that are used by the consumers. And finally, we have the cloud, the remote ability to use hardware and software resources to manage processes. This is another very important element. Distribution confronted with this revolution, moving from physical to digital or integrating both aspects. So how can distribution lead e-commerce? So should it accept e-commerce and act as if it didn't exist? Of course, we have information technology that on the one hand, tends to do everything on its own. That is, we no longer need a physical store, a physical point of sale. On the other hand, we have the store, the point of sale that wants to at least partly participate in this process, and therefore they have to impose their presence. Of the future will be the perfect combination of all the different players. As you can see, the multi-channel approach is something which is now changing. In the past, consumers used to look up in the internet to search for information and then went to the store to buy a product. This trend, however, is decreasing by 6 points between 2012 and 2015, a very quick transformation. On the other hand, a store is becoming increasingly more a showroom. So I see a product in the store, but then I go and buy it in the internet. And this is a very strong, a very clear and significant trend that results from the data collected. The virtual environment creates a very complicated system. And within this system, the point of sale or any physical element being part of the distribution system are no longer the most significant part. So what about the future for stores? They will go on with their function of mediating between demand and supply, however, in a different way. They will have a very important role both before and after the sale, as a showroom, as a touch point, as a delivery point for the provision of services. Well, many people do not live in areas where you can obtain a product that you ordered online, so you have to go and pick it up in a store, and they are going to be the place where to customize your product. So stores changes and their role as well. Clearly enough, for store managers, this means they have to take this situation into account. So what about the eyewear distribution vis-à-vis this change? Are they going to consider it as a threat? Are they going to try and integrate themselves? Well, this is what is happening abroad. France is a specific market. 20% of contact lenses are already sold online. If you were here on Saturday, you know that Chris is one of the major players in the French distribution market that have many members, and in their website they explain how to order online, and they invite to pick up the product in the store. So, well, they may have avoided this change if they had been able to, but it is much better to react to the changes rather than deny it. These are some very interesting examples of what I'm explaining. The one on the top left-hand side of the slide, this one is a big store in Birmingham, Selfridges. You order and you pick up the product. This is Auchan, so you go there, and whenever you want, you get what you bought in the parking place. And this is Specs. Well, this has a 50% of the British market, and as you can see, free delivery on contact lenses. This is La Corte Inglés in Spain, and this is a very interesting partnership between Poste Italiane and Amazon. Amazon has become a global sales platform, and for those who do not have the possibility to get the goods delivered during the day, so there is nobody at home because you work or you work in a big company. Well, of course, there are delivery points. So Amazon is delivering in specific places at the Italian post offices, and there is a specific system to avoid the product to be picked up by the wrong person. So there are many different solutions for many different products, and this also applies to eyewear, and there are already solutions in place abroad, as we could see. Another interesting development is this one. In the past, supply chains were made up of primary logistics, factory, wholesaler, retailers, etc. And now we have companies and supply chains that do this at the same time, and we have seen some of these examples. So, wholesale and retail, the segments, become part of an industrial manufacturer. So to reach the necessary scale and to become an international player, because you have to play different roles in different markets, possibly in different continents, well, through mergers and acquisitions, you get to you manage to set up companies with the right scale, and the same applies to joint ventures, for example. In the eyewear market, one of the reactions that developed parallel to the big merger, we have the association or the joint venture. So there are for example, big brands, Moët & Chandon, Louis Vuitton, that sign up agreements, for example, with ophthalmic lens manufacturers. So the result is as follows. Together we are bigger and we can better cope the challenges, each one with its own strength. In other cases, we have a merger, so different entities that are merged into one single company. And then, of course, so throughout all segments, throughout all markets and products, we have the same processes. The dynamic and the modalities, of course, are different depending on the sector. So these strategies are aimed at controlling and curbing the costs throughout the supply chain, at maximizing the margins. So we maximize the margins, removing intercompany transfers. In the past, the manufacturer used to sell to the wholesaler to the retailer to the point of sale, and each one of the players had to have its margins. Then optimization of the benchmark, that is the comparison with other competitors. We have to reduce the sales price to increase competitiveness. If I earn enough money and if I earn good margins at prices that become increasingly lower, I can increase my competitiveness and then lead the revolution that ICT and e-commerce generated, thus setting the stage for this transformation. Without the IT, without smartphones and without all these digital devices, this transformation would have been impossible. So we no longer have segments, and we have now companies replacing entire parts of the supply chains. So from a modern distribution system, we are moving towards a company that enshrines a full supply chain with all the complications that result from this. The Inditex group materialized a great intuition by Benetton, by an Italian entrepreneur who, however, did not implement his intuition. Well, Zara, for example, they are based in 93 markets in 5 continents with more than 7,000 stores. One single supply chain directly to the end consumer. There is another example in the eyewear market that I remembered, that I forgot, sorry, Butch. Butch is a British chain which is present in many different markets, pharmacies with a huge amount of turnover. The greatest Italian distributor, Coop Italia, 17 billion euros, and they are chemists, and 34 billion pounds is their turnover. They have a very well integrated offer of services. They have practices that work in partnership with the NHS. They have opticians, they have a practice with ophthalmologists and optometrists, they have operating theaters for cataract and refractive surgery. And this is within one single system. And we have one single supply chain to control the product manufacturing. And well, they are very competitive vis-à-vis the end consumers. Let's have a look at these scenarios. Scenarios, of course, have an impact on mega trends that in turn influence globalization, and they are influenced by political and natural events. So if we have a look at the past years, we have contradictory trends. The world is very difficult to interpret. There are very different factors. Since the 60s, the world population has increased. However, this increase is slowing down. As you can see, red is the whole world, US blue line, and Eurozone, the yellow line. The world population is increasing, but at a slower pace compared to the past. The world has changed, as you can see in this slide. Just think about Mr. Trump. When he started his political career, nobody would have ever thought he could win. However, due to the disruption, we have new rules of the game. So a person, an outsider like Mr. Trump, managed to win the elections. And so far, he hasn't actually done anything different compared to previous politicians. However, he's using a completely different method and logic. That's why. That's why it's so impressive. And then France, with Marine Le Pen, who wishes to leave the euro. Erdogan, he was supposed to be the European ally, thus allowing us to partner with Arab countries. So, well, he underwent a coup, and thanks to this coup, he managed to remove all competitors. So he physically eliminated any competitors he could have had. And then, of course, in Italy, the reforms that the population demanded collapsed during the referendum. So it is a very contradictory world, which is difficult to interpret.
So in an international scenario, it's very hard to get out of this crisis that is continuing on also in 2017. And you see that the ratio also among between different currencies, the value of euro and dollar. This is one of the elements in the competition. Trump would like to have a stronger double euros, which otherwise we have problems in exporting. And then, of course, the oil price also plays a role. The Trump effect, we don't know what he will end up with. And then the European recovery, which is not so strong and not so consistent. So we have on the other side this volatile price of oil, and China also running through a very critical moment, because in the past it grew a lot, but also internally inflation went up, and this led to internal problems. The Brexit effect, that is still to be seen, because the UK is still in the European Union, and the financial risks. We have seen what happened in the recent past. Another element is the divide and the gap between emerging country growth rates and the historical rich countries' growth rate, and this gap is increasing in favor of emerging ones. In terms of world trade and world income, well, the situation is more or less the same. As you can see, from 2011 on, the growth actually has been very, very little, even though, again, a lot of differences in the different economies, so it's not consistent throughout the world. As for Italy, we do have many critical issues, and you see that in the world we have a higher GDP growth than in Italy, and also family consumptions are larger in other countries than in Italy. We are always lagging behind in this respect, and actually we are ranked among the last positions, and also in terms of official reserves, it's quite critical. So here you see families' consumptions and the GDP growth rate, and inflation on an annual basis also had an inconsistent trend. So you see the first international crisis and then the second international crisis, and you see consumptions on the part of Italian families. But to better analyze possible consumptions on the part of families in the future, well, the so-called compulsory consumptions in the last 25 years have taken up 10 points in the income of families. Those purchases we cannot do without. And if we look at this share has eaten up percentage points in other sectors. Of course, contact lenses and prescription lenses might be among the compulsory purchases, but this is not true for sunglasses, for example. So if Italy wants to be ranked among the players in the world, Italy will have to solve these problems. If we compare Italy with Spain, France, and Germany, you see that the other three countries have ended up more or less in the same position, whereas this is not true for Italy. So we do have a difference of about 10 points with respect to the other countries, and not in our favor. Moreover, we have, of course, competition also between glasses and contact lenses. We will have more and more people getting out of the poverty range, and so they will have money to spend on consumption goods. We know that half of the inhabitants in the world are not wearing corrective glasses so far, and of course this will change in the future, and the world of glasses and that of contact lenses are two different ones. So technological innovation in contact lenses and refraction field, well, they are not applicable in the same easy way as glasses. Glasses are quite simple products, whereas contact lenses require a more complex organization. So in terms of the world population that is more or less poor, and of course glasses can be sold to a larger population, and also do not have to be sort of changed so often. And in this case, we find a distribution chain that is mainly based on hospitals, optician stores, and wholesale. Whereas innovation is moving towards self-adjusting glasses. What are these glasses? Well, these are glasses, the corrective power of which can be defined by the user and with an intervention on the part of the user. Now, that is very far away from being implemented into practice, even though research is moving in this direction. Contact lenses, they're more recent in terms of their development, and the market is mainly in Western countries, and the penetration of contact lenses is actually higher in Anglo-Saxon countries. We have about 130 million people in the world wearing contact lenses, so a big difference versus those wearing glasses. It's actually a richer population, the one wearing contact lenses, and they're seen also as sort of means in between and towards surgical or therapeutical interventions, and we have quite also a high concentration, and they also belong to the pharmaceutical industry, more integrated with wholesale. A lot of communication is done towards final consumers. And contact lenses also can be purchased in other settings. So in the pharmacy, not just the optician store, and so on and so forth. If we look at these figures, and we are looking at the growth rates of the different products. So contact lenses moving up 26%. Glasses are stagnated to only 2.8% growth rate.
In 8 years, and sunglasses instead are losing 20 points in terms of sales value. So we have, on the one hand, focus on eyewear in terms of spectacles. However, so contact lenses are growing at a different pace compared to spectacles. Clearly enough, as we said, in order to survive on the market, we have to become bigger, and the financial markets are fostering mergers, acquisitions, or joint ventures. Here you see the investments in Italy by foreign players. On the left-hand side, you see value-wise the amount of money coming from abroad, and on the right-hand side, the numbers. France, well, these are, by the way, the data for the last 5 years. So you see France, 185 mergers and acquisitions, then US 282, Great Britain 21,300, and then all the other countries. Italy also goes abroad and invests abroad. Italy is not only a prey, but we also invest abroad. We are also internationalized, and mergers take place abroad. As you can see, so we also carry out some transactions with different values. So in some years we invested just 5 billion euros, in other years over 30 billion euros. So we do the same also abroad. As you can see in this chart, so this is the stock exchange, well, that's the stock value of both companies, Luxottica and Essilor. After years of stock value increase, and as you know, the stock value defines the equity of a company. So after many successful years, the stock prices started to decrease in the latest years. And so the transaction we heard about, and which is about to be finalized, has to be interpreted in the light of these figures. So in order to survive on the market, you have to be big and to have a big value. If you lose value, you need to take measures in order to avoid this. This is not the biggest merger ever made at a worldwide level, so we have transactions with a much higher value, 180, etc. And these are the most important mergers and acquisitions in Italy, performed by foreign companies, Bulgari, Parmalat. However, we are talking about 3 to 7 billion euros. At the top, the highest value was Pirelli by ChemChina, a state chemical company that acquired Pirelli, especially the patents. However, these values are much lower than the Essilor-Luxottica merger, which, the final result of which is over 50 billion euros. Another interesting element is that, well, first of all, we have to consider that not all mergers are finalized, so not all marriages take place. Most of these merger transactions, moreover, become or acquire different or become different after 2 or 3 years. This was the biggest industrial transaction in the eyewear market, and this was the biggest transaction in terms of its consequences. So it is one of the greatest concentration transaction in the sector. Luxottica is the leading player in frames, and it is the leading player worldwide because they have thousands of stores in many different continents apart from Europe, with the exception of Italy. And this transaction may have a very important impact on the Italian GDP. As we know, Luxottica is currently listed in the Milan Stock Exchange, and it contributes positively for more than €1 billion to the trade balance. This is what was published by the press. Well, this is not actually very relevant for us. So the press focused on the size of the merger, €46 million, while others say and wonder whether they have the technology in place to finalize the transaction, and they doubt whether the transaction will actually be performed. But nobody focused on the impact that this transaction will have on the eyewear sector. So the news concentrated on gossip news or on financial information. These two companies that are envisaging to create an integration committee whereby both boards will continue to exist, still have many steps to make. At least 5 steps are needed to finalize this transaction. So the transaction is started, but who knows whether and when it is finalized. So this merger, however, complies with the globalization trends and with the main concept that regulate global markets nowadays. So as it is the case for the car sector, for example. Below you see, for example, Novartis acquiring Ciba Vision and Alcon, Valiant, Bausch & Lomb and Allergant, and in the car industry, Fiat becomes FCA. And you see how many brands and how many companies have to be integrated within the supply chain. Magneti Marelli, for example, do not manufacture any cars, but car components. So this situation applies to many different sectors. So the problem of vertical integration, horizontal integration, globalization, scope and scale and concentration apply to many different sectors. Big companies always look to, will always strive to be present throughout all the global markets, and they have started similar transactions as Essilor and Luxottica. They are actually complementary players. Well, the dream of every company manufacturing frames or lenses was that of offering a complete pair of glasses to the end consumer, and this is what they did, whereby they have all the different elements of the supply chain. So they have 136 distribution and logistic partners locally. They're able to perform all activities, thus optimizing costs and processes. Vis-a-vis this great event that will certainly bring about a change in global distributions, the eyewear distribution system and the cultural system will have to adapt. And the school system has to adapt as well. So the question is whether we will be able to adopt effective renewal strategies and find new strategic approaches to overcome past contrasts. Well, this challenge can be mastered provided that the current situation is properly understood. Otherwise, the solutions that may be found will most probably will not work. Good. So we have only 5 minutes left. And by the way, Dr. Fatelli is also present here. He was a strategic advisor for distribution and industrial systems, so he may help me answering some questions. Well, he knows much better than me the evolutions and trends of the current world. Thank you very much.
Domande?
Questions? No questions. No one dares. Everyone wants to leave. If there are no questions, then we can all go. Oh, actually, there is a question.
Se tutto quello che...
Now, if all what you say is true, then in the future, will we need more opticians, better prepared opticians, or nothing will change in this respect? Well, of course, my answer, and considering my role, well, I think that in the future, if we want to enhance the tool of our professionalism, well, we need to have, certified opticians, of course, and this is key. So, when people will have an employer, of course, they will have to show a good CV. So we have seen that actually professionalism must increase. So on our side, we have the fact that actually population is aging, and so people live longer, and therefore in the years we will have an increase in the number of glasses and contact lens users. And in such a context, in order to sort of cope with the competition on the part of some tools, like Shamir has a machine in different airports in the Middle East, and you can get your glasses in an hour or so. Customized glasses, of course, in terms of prescription, they're not so evolved, but it's a trend that it's already there. So devices that can make a diagnosis and provide glasses at the same time. So those opticians that are not highly educated and that are not able to sort of understand what people require won't have a role, whereas a role will be there for those that will have such capabilities. And we know that we have, in terms of our profession, different levels, and economic success sometimes is not linked to real competence in the field, whereas this will be more and more so in the future. This is my personal view. Thank you very much, and hope to meet you next year here at the Mido.